Welcome to the Big Seance podcast. I'm Patrick Keller of BigSeance.com, and this is a place for an open discussion on all things paranormal, but specifically topics like ghosts and hauntings, paranormal research, spirit communication, psychics and mediums, and life after death. So basically, anything that pops up in my paranormal world. The candles are already lit, so you might as well come on in and join the seance.
Well, hello, para-nerds. One or two of you must have been dabbling with some new spirit communication techniques, or maybe you've dusted off your Ouija board, because we are back from the dead, at least for today. And I'm excited to dust off the cobwebs here in the parlor and invite you back to meet a new friend of mine. On this show, we've had medical doctors, psychologists, hypnotherapists, a philosopher, a handful of parapsychologists, at least one anthropologist that I can remember, and more recently, a musicologist. Well, my guest today, along with her mediumship and just general fabulousness, she has experiences and expertise in so many areas, but also happens to be our first, I think, ethnomusicologist. And so I am super excited to add that to the list. So Dr. Holly Hobbs is a cultural researcher, psychic medium, and numerologist. Well, there's another ologist I need to add to my list, I guess. She's based in New Orleans. She received her PhD in ethnomusicology from Tulane University, which informs her cultural research and work as the co-director of the production company Candlelight Folklore Society. We're definitely going to talk about that, which she runs with her husband, the producer and filmmaker Randall Perez. As a medium, she is the director of Morning Glory Healing, a healing service that holds retreats throughout the U.S. and Caribbean, teaching students to connect with their own spiritual abilities through mediumship training, yoga, and energy healing. As both a medium and a scientist, she is interested in the spaces where multidimensional worlds connect. And you can learn more about Holly by visiting morninggloryhealing.com or candlelightfolkloresociety.com. And there's some socials and things that we'll talk about at the end before we leave you guys. So welcome to the parlor, Dr. Holly Hobbs.
Oh, what an introduction. Hey, Patrick, nice to see you.
Oh, and really, truthfully, listeners, we should have been recording for the last 20, 30 minutes because our conversations already have been just so delicious and fabulous. And I cannot wait for you to learn about Holly and her husband and some of the work they do. And so let's fill in everyone on how we met.
Well, one time on a dark and stormy night, you and I spent the night in a very haunted house together, which is sort of halfway true. I just wanted to start that way. But we mostly did. So you and I met last summer, and I joke with my husband, Randy, because I say that the origin story for so many things these days is the Brumley House, but I really honestly think that that's true. And I'll tell everybody how I came to know about the Brumley House shortly. But for you and I, we met last summer. I think it was August, right?
I think so, yep. And listeners might know this because we've had a couple of episodes on the Brumley House, episodes 156 and 157 going back to 2020. And it's more commonly known as the Haunted Castle House. So just so listeners know, the Haunted Castle House is the Steve and Judy Skinner.
Mm-hmm. And if you Google it, Haunted Castle House is where it lives for sure.
Yep.
Yeah. So Randy and I had gone to, we got permission, or Steve asked us actually to come and lead a little bit of a seance that night. And they invited you, and then we filmed it, and we had a big old party. And we did a little seance. We filmed some stuff, which we've now turned into a short mini doc called The Brumley House, which lives on YouTube, which we'll talk about. But everything about this Brumley House was fascinating from the start. So my husband is a TV and film producer. And he's worked for the BBC and Nat Geo and Discovery for many, many years. For the past couple of years, every summer, he's worked at a show at the Lake of the Ozarks. And so I go up with him. We live in New Orleans, but we travel every summer and go up to Missouri, which that's another connection between you and me because you and I are both Missouri people. So I'm born and raised in Columbia, and you're over quite near Kansas City, right?
Well, I grew up there. I'm now on the St. Louis side.
You're on the St. Louis side, yes.
Yep.
But originally you came from the West Coast of Missouri, and now you're on the East
exactly.
Coast.
The landlocked West Coast of Missouri. Yes.
And so I've gone up with him for a couple of summers, and then I'll split time because I still have a farm outside Columbia. And so one day last summer, I was Googling around the area for haunted locations, right? First of all, because I'm interested. I'm a medium, as you mentioned. I'm always interested. From the very beginning, I was born in October. I've always been interested in this stuff, right? Which, fun fact, from a numerological perspective, people born in October are spiritual leaders, are supposed to be they get a jump start as a potential of being some sort of spiritual or energetic leader. Interesting.
Shut up. I'm jealous.
Anyway, so this October baby has always been very interested in this stuff. And of course, then, I've worked as a medium for a very long time. So I've lived in these spaces forever, but also just for fun. I like to seek out haunted locations. And so everything that happened with this was very synchronistic. So I remember finding the haunted castle house, which is only about 20 or 30 minutes drive from Lake of the Ozarks. Then I found an email address. I emailed. Judy answered. I didn't know it was Judy at the time, but she answered almost immediately. And she said, actually, it's very interesting that you messaged me because we have one more night that we're going to be here for the rest of the season, and then we're closing. And actually, we have a paranormal investigation happening that night, and we have one more spot. So I said, well, I'm in. What else am I going to say, right? So Randy was working. So I put on my little Nancy Drew hat or whatever, right? And I don't bring any of the gadgets. Whenever I do anything like this, there's those people that have all the gadgets and the blinking lights and the things. I don't do any of that. I just bring myself. So I went, and it was Iowa Riverside Paranormal Group, I believe, that was running the paranormal investigation. So I just kind of tagged along. We were there for hours and hours, I think 8 p.m. to 3 a.m. or something, right? A long, long time. And from the minute that I walked into the house, there was this sense of timelessness that I come to recognize very quickly as the immediate sign of a haunted house for me. Also, as soon as I step foot in a haunted house, it's almost as if the center of balance or the center of gravity gets shifty. Right? So it's almost to me, I don't know if this is real or not, but to me, energetically, it feels like the floor kind of tips upward and everything just gets wonky, right? So I can always tell when I first walk in. And that house, I walked in the front door and it was like, whoa, right? Now, as I said, I am very, very deep in this stuff. I've traveled the world over many times, and I've been to some of the most haunted places in the world. And when I tell you that, to me, the haunted castle house in Brumley, Missouri is, if not the most, one of the most haunted places I've been anywhere in the world, right? It's just a really extraordinary place. And, Steve will talk about this too. Those of you who go back and listen to Patrick's wonderful episodes about the Brumly House, and you can learn more, go to their website. But Steve always talks about how everything is not consistent, right? Sometimes the house feels like your grandma lives there and it's comforting and warm and nothing. And then other times it's like, oh boy, right? Strap in, you're along for a ride. So even in an incredibly haunted house, it's not like it's haunted 24 hours a day. And it's not like these things constantly happen, right? But when I walked in, I said, okay, this is something very, very special here. And then met Steve and Judy, spent that 6 hours, ended up leading some impromptu seance there and got a lot of excellent results. Then Steve at the end of the night invited me back. And that's when we decided on a different time to go back in August. And then that's when you were there. And we spent a really lovely night. talking about stuff and talking about hauntings. And, we filmed a bunch. I led a little baby seance and we kind of got the energy up and we got things going. And I remember it was funny. Steve ended up hitting his knee like mistakenly on the table and everything just went flat, right? Remember, we were getting the energy up and everything was moving like it was supposed to. And then it was like, meh, meh. So that ended up ending fairly quickly, but we still had a great time.
That's funny how that works.
Yeah, think about it. It's a balloon, right? It's a balloon that you blow into and it just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger, right? And the vibration gets higher and higher and higher, but you have to have that kind of consistency. And then sometimes when it's a very delicate balance, then anything can throw it off and then boom, you got to start over.
Yeah, and it's kind of like I've noticed in more paranormal investigation situations on the less, well, I don't want to say less spiritual because to me, everything is kind of spiritual. But sometimes, and I'm so not intuitive as my audience knows, but I can feel that buzz, that energy sometimes. And sometimes that doesn't happen until people lighten up and start giggling or start laughing and kind of forget what they're there for. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, somebody's joined us, or it feels like, the energy is picking up. It's funny how it works.
Now, you know more than me. I mean, your seance is called the Big Seance, for Christ's sake. You know lots more about this than I do.
Well, just know lots of things to me can be a seance. An EVP session can be a seance in my mind, and a Ouija board. I can count on one hand probably the number of actual traditional seances I've sat in, and that includes yours. So sometimes people are shocked, like, what? You don't do seances all the time? Like, no, I wish.
Okay, well then never mind, because I've been to way more than you.
Yeah, you have probably done way more traditional seances.
I have. I've done, I don't know, I don't count, maybe 40, right? A lot. And what people listening at home might be interested to know is, just like so many things, of course, it's not like the movies whatsoever. And the best thing you can do to have a good seance is to laugh. So, for example, one of the best seances I ever attended that I was a part of was, as I said, we lived down here in New Orleans across Lake Pontchartrain.
No energy there at all.
No, it's boring. It's boring. Just some old suburb around here. New Orleans, of course, is deeply energetically interesting. But when you cross Lake Pontchartrain to go to the North Shore, it's called, which you may have heard of Mandeville or Slidell or Covington, right? That's very, very haunted. So those are traditional native grounds, and they have these were natural convergences of water. So native people use these as healing grounds for thousands of years. That's also where, teams of investigators and paranormal people and people who clear houses or whatever, they're always getting called to the North Shore, right? One of the best seances I ever went to was on the North Shore, and we rented a cabin. It was me and like 8 other mediums. We rented a cabin in the middle of the woods. And of course, you wait. It does need to be done in darkness. And so we waited for it to get pitch black. And there was a girl who was about 6 months pregnant there, and she had a couple of little kids already. And in order to get the best seance possible, the best thing I can tell you to do is to sing. Nursery rhymes are what everybody sings, because that's what everybody knows, right? And so we sing Old MacDonald Had a Farm. And this girl, because she had the little kids, made all of the sounds of the animals on the farm. And it was hilarious. And everybody was laughing and giggling. And it was just really, really fun. It got the energy up so high that it was one of the best seances I've ever been to, because it was just absolutely ridiculous. And that's the key here, right? There's nothing, sure, there are elements of things that become, if you're not used to them, they could be perceived as scary. But when you're in a real seance working with real people who know what they're doing, they get the energy up through pure joy, levity, fun, lightness. And then when you're in that space, crazy stuff could be happening, things could be flying around the room, but all you feel is that deep and unabiding love from the other side. And you don't even stop to think about, okay, there's stuff flying around the room and that's scary to me.
And it also makes me open my mind to like what a seance is to me, because I have led several small groups through investigation at Belvoir Winery outside of Kansas City. It's a old orphanage, basically. And it's the bunker that I typically, when I've been asked to like help with that, it's in the bunker, of course. I got COVID there after 2020, 1 year in the bunker. But, the lore is that there are children that hide out in that bunker. And I led the group in Mary Had a Little Lamb, and everybody's in a circle. And these are, ghost hunting nerds that want to experience things. So we have gadgets and K2 meters, and a lot of people were bringing cat balls. And there was an area in the corner of the bunker where there were a few cat balls and like a K2 meter that someone brought. And as we were singing Mary Had a Little Lamb, I think it was, all of a sudden the lights start blinking to the beat of the song.
Amazing.
And it was like, and that only happened like once, is just the right moment. And I was like, shut up. I don't understand how it happens or if there's an explanation for it or what it is. But, there were probably people close to tears at that moment. And that's the energy that I'm like, this is why.
That's it. It's it. And, no offense to anybody. Everybody comes to this in a different way, right? But I'm not one of those people who walks into a house like, who's there?
Right.
Are you mad that I'm here? And then I turn on my gadgets or whatever, right? Oh, I bet you're going to be angry if I do this, if I talk about your dead baby, right? Whatever. I don't do that. And again, no offense to anybody. Everybody comes to this in their own way. However, I know, right? I know as a medium and as a scientist both, I understand that everything is simply layers of frequency. And if you can get your vibration up high enough, then you will find contact, right? And what does it mean to get your vibration up high enough? Well, just like I was talking about before, through fun, through song. There's a reason why people sing in church. People understand intuitively that it gets your energy up closer to God, however you wish to define God.
I want to continue talking about this nerdy mediumship stuff, but really quick, going back to the Castle House, the Brumley House, before Steve and Judy purchased the home, which I think was in like 2019.
2018 or 19, yeah.
I cannot believe it's been that long. It doesn't seem like that long at all.
Nope.
There are a number of paranormal shows that had been to the haunted Castle House. And, there's kind of a lore of stories that people would tell pre-Steve and Judy. And then one thing that I think you and I both love about Steve is that he is kind of a truth searcher. He is not, he is fascinated by the Castle House, and that is why they have the Castle House. But if there's something that has been told for years and he finds out it's not true, they're open about that. And they're like, we found out this isn't the case or whatever.
Yep.
And he dives into the history of it. Have you known a lot of, the lore from before Steve and Judy? And, with what you felt, I don't know, what do you think about some of those stories?
Well, I did. I went back and, researched it in great detail after. So the first time when I was Googling, right, last summer, when Castle House first came onto my radar, I had never once heard about it. And so then I kind of looked into it at that point before I met Steve and Judy, learned a lot about the lore of the house prior to them, and then, of course, went and heard from their perspective. And there were lots of stories that had been told and retold. And then, other paranormal researchers had done their work there, right, and created their videos or whatever they did. I tend to walk into every haunted place as if it's the first time and I know nothing at all. I prefer to do it that way, just because I want to make sure that the information that I'm getting as a medium is not influenced by any of the lore, right, to the best of my ability.
Right.
And so I don't pay attention as much to those stories as perhaps other people do, even though I'm fascinated by history and I want to know just as much as I possibly can. One thing that I found extremely interesting about the Brumley House, and I think Steve talks about it a lot, is just how many different types of hauntings there are there, right? So there are the, what I would call the straightforward ghosts, the dead people, the dead loved ones. There are a lot of them in there. Then there are land spirits, the energies of the people and things who inhabited the land long before that house was even there, or through the last 200 years of the history of the house. Then you have, things like the elementals, the elements that are there. Then you have the history, right? The Confederate soldiers who camped out nearby and the native people who called that place home long before that, right? That is a very, very active native area. In fact, just a couple of miles away, you may know that there's the Bone Cave. It's called the Bone Cave, actually.
I don't know the Bone Cave.
Yes, indeed. It is closed to visitors because they found native artifacts in it and a tremendous amount of bones. And it's just right across the highway and down a bit. And it's so blocked off, but there are a couple of books about the Bone Cave.
And there are so many caves under Missouri. It is like unbelievable how many caves that we don't even know about.
Well, we are the cave state.
Are we the cave state?
Yeah. We're also where rivers run. We're also like, show me. We have a lot of things going on.
Yeah.
So it is all of these things, right? To get a good haunting, you've got to have a couple of the standard, typical things that go with this, right? So number one is proximity to water, right? That's what happens with so many of these New Orleans and Louisiana haunted homes because everything is a swamp. There's water everywhere. Water is an energy conduit. It holds energy extremely well. It holds memory, holds everything, right? So proximity to water, especially if you have some proximity to underground cave systems with quartz and limestone and all of that, right? That karst topography.
Yep.
In fact, you probably know the Lemp House in St. Louis is above a whole entire cave system.
Yeah.
Right? Which is another reason why that place has held on to their haunting so long.
Another one of my favorites.
Indeed. And so there are all these kind of building blocks that come to contribute to a haunting that stays consistently haunted over time.
Plus, the Castle House has medical history, which fascinates me.
And an incredible amount of medical history, right? So it was used as an impromptu hospital during the Civil War. And then after that, it was home to, I think, 3 doctors, perhaps, at least 3 doctors who had their own private practice there. So an incredible amount of people had trauma in this house, died in this house, right? Convalesced in this house. People don't have to have died in a haunted house to have it be haunted.
Right.
That's a misnomer, but it doesn't hurt. I'll tell you that. So everything is going on in this house. And then almost immediately, as a medium, I tend to pay attention to the stuff that comes out of my mouth, right? Because I'm not always in charge of it. I'd like to think I am, but I'm not so much. And I kind of immediately found myself telling Steve and Judy about my doppelganger story from our haunted house in New Orleans, which I'll tell you in a second. And then both Steve and Judy said, oh, we've both had one of these. And missing time, right? Like these big kind of swaths of time that just kind of disappear and you can't account for them. These are all things that are happening in that home, as well as all the different stuff. They see full color apparitions. They get knocks. They get, things moving around, all sorts of things, right? So it's an incredibly haunted space with a lot of different types of paranormal activity happening around and at the same time. The doppelganger story that happened to me in New Orleans, now we live in a very haunted house. And this is a house that has been in Randy's family for 100 years.
Oh, wow.
And he has a lot of his own family who's died here. His brother killed himself, not 2 feet from where I'm sitting talking to you.
Wow.
His grandmother died in this house. His great aunt died in this house. We believe his grandfather died in this house. New Orleans is also just going back to the proximity of water, right? And kind of underground water tables and cave systems. This place is a bowl. It's below sea level. It holds on to energy extremely well, right? So this house is haunted. And maybe 2 summers ago, I was taking a shower. Randy said, I'm going to go work in the shed. He went out to work in the shed. I go to take a shower. Maybe 5 minutes later, I hear him walk up the stairs, walk past the bathroom, go into our bedroom. I peek out my head, right? And I can see him as he walks past. He goes into the bedroom. He opens the closet. He's rummaging around the closet. Then 2 seconds later, I get out. I put a towel on. I go around the corner and he's not there. Then I walk to the kitchen and I look down and he is happily working away in his shed. And when I tell you that as a medium, I see and experience things I cannot explain daily, multiple times daily.
Mm-hmm.
But that one really got me. So then I found myself almost immediately when I walked into this house telling Steve and Judy this story and asking them if they had had anything else like that happen to them. And they said, of course. I forget which one was which. I think it was Judy. Steve was mowing the lawn. She was inside.
I think you're right.
Then she saw him walk through the front door, walk across and through the living room and into their little bedroom that they have. Then she looked out the window and he was still mowing the lawn outside.
And I think he hollered her name too.
Yeah. And it's just this kind of, now what is that? I don't know. The best I can understand it is some sort of time loop, right? Where just it's like pausing a tape and going forward or back or whatever. And you go into the haunted castle house and you can almost feel nearly immediately the time gets wonky in there. And so, mimics and doppelgangers, they don't always happen in a haunted house. It's not like this is run-of-the-mill hauntings, but it did happen that once in my house, and it's happened to both of them twice. So I think that's just fascinating.
And then if you just add to the fact that Steve and Judy are just so lovely and their energy is fabulous. And, I don't know that everyone who stays there gets to stay, get in the bed and sleep in, one of the guest rooms. But to me, the first night that I stayed there with Karen Dahlman, it was just Karen and I and Steve and Judy. And it was just magic, right? And I think it was early spring, late winter. It was an unexpected snowstorm that we got. And so we woke up and you look out the window of your haunted castle house bedroom and there's snow everywhere. And it was just a magic feeling. And then it's like, holy crap, now we've got to drive home in the snow. But Judy's fabulous dinners she's made, just the stories, and of course, friends now. I just love the castle house. To me, it's a beautiful energy. Haunted or not, just the energy, love it.
Mm-hmm. It's true. And so when I say the Brumley story was the origin story for so many things, I think that's absolutely true because, yes, I'm a very busy working medium. I do about 40 readings a month and I am very tired, Patrick. I'm very tired.
I can imagine.
Yeah. So I'm thinking about, at some point pretty soon I'll start to wind down or turn off individual readings and move everything to Patreon and group students and group teachings and retreats and whatever. And I still work for NPR. NPR is my day job. So I still do that. And I'm writing a couple books and, so I'm busy. I got a lot of stuff going on. But meanwhile, Randy is, like I said, a TV and film producer. And just like so many industries, his is really tanking in so many ways. All the traditional big science shows, right? They're all drying up and now everything's shifting to different territory.
All media in general.
Yeah. And I'm a musician, right? And we'll talk about ethnomusicology here in a second, but all industries, right, across the board are experiencing something like this. So last summer, he and I were sitting around like, what can we do, right? How can we join forces and do a project together? And not really like we're expecting anything. We just wanted to spend time together and do things that we think are fun. So we ended up coming up with this production company called Candlelight Folklore Society. And the Brumly House mini documentary that we put up on YouTube, actually very recently, a couple of weeks ago, is the first kind of foray into our work. And we have a couple of more on the way that are coming right after this one. And so it was our way to just have fun, tell good stories. And from our perspective, with the work that we're doing with this production company, it's almost immaterial if a haunting is quote unquote real. Now, the Brumley House is very haunted, right? But from the perspective of storytellers, it's almost immaterial whether the house is haunted or if somebody actually saw a Bigfoot or whatever. That's not it. What we're interested in is the experience of the people that experience it. And that's what I think is fascinating.
I totally resonate with that.
Yes. So that's where we're coming from as storytellers. So, if you look at the comments in the YouTube under, there are some people who are like, I didn't see a single ghost.
Yeah.
Where's the haunted? I didn't see no haunted, right? And so that That's fine. That's totally fine. And there's a space for that, right? And there's
Right.
lots of different things on YouTube. We're never going to be the shock and awe storytellers. We're really interested in the quiet intersections of science and spirituality and faith and dying rural towns and everything in between.
Yeah, I tell people sometimes some of my more emotional experiences in paranormal investigation, typically with small groups or whatever, some of those experiences have been just sitting in a dark room and imagining who you think might be there on the other side and just trying to reach out and have a heartfelt conversation. And all of a sudden the energy changes. And I sometimes just want to cry, imagining that I am speaking to someone who wants to share about their family or wants to share about who they are. And I'm not hearing back, but just imagining that I am and just the energy that I'm feeling, I feel like I've had a full-on conversation with something. And sometimes it just makes me want to cry. That's like some of the most beautiful energy I've ever had. And nothing happened. There were no bumps in the dark. No one got touched. There was no EVP saying, go to hell or whatever. It was just a beautiful experience that was kind of in my head.
Well, see, I would push back on all the words you just used, right? I would push back on your use of the word imagination, right? Or imaginary, right?
Yeah.
Yes, every part of this starts with a spark of imagination. But at some point, very soon after that, they take over and they start driving the car, right? So yeah, you may begin it with a spark of your imagination, but everything else is them. And when I say them, everybody's got a guiding team, right? Everybody has helping and compassionate loved ones on the other side. Most people go through their entire lives thinking they're alone, and they're not. And we know that, right? And so there's no harm in going into a haunted house with your gadgets and doing your thing. And if that's what you want to do and that's how you have fun, that's great. But I know that the true magic, just like you know, is sitting in that dark room, opening yourself up to spirit, and allowing that beautiful co-creation to occur.
Mm-hmm. And, something I've learned as well, it's no secret I've kind of pulled back from like paranormal experiences and don't do a lot of my experiments and don't sit and do EVP sessions every day like I used to. And I don't feel the urge like I've always got to be sitting in the middle of the paranormal, right? But the more you immerse yourself in it, those are the times I feel that, if people want to have an experience, you're not going to just all of a sudden one day go out and have an experience. You've got to kind of learn and put yourself in places and experiences where things could happen. And the more you go deep and, get some spiritual all up in there. I have such great vocabulary. Then things are more likely to happen. My experiences have been around those times where, I was doing, speaking of seance, 1 month I was doing 2 different seance experience with a then medium friend and organizing that. And I also was helping a local family with an experience in their home overnight in the middle of a week. And I was teaching. And I was also blogging every day, and I was writing a report on some EVP that I was working on. And it was probably 2 or 3 in the morning, and I'm typing away furiously trying to finish this blog post or whatever. And, the cabinet where I keep all of my tools and gadgets and recorders and things like that, the door to the cabinet just goes and pops open. And I turn and I look at it and I go, okay. And then I go back to my blog and I'm like, okay, I've got to finish this blog. And like an hour later, I was like, you idiot. You are writing about wanting to experience things. And suddenly the door opens and it's like, hello, we're here. And I ignored it. But it's because I feel like that was, and I had a number of experiences in that couple of month period because I was just crazy in deep into all of it. And so they knew I was there and they were looking for me.
Absolutely, right? And everybody, I think most people don't understand that this stuff works on levels of permission, right? And even for our loved ones who, of course, love us and they're on the other side helping and doing everything they can, and our guides, guardian angels, teachers, like all of this stuff is real. And whether you choose to believe that this all exists within your own personal subconscious, that's okay. works the same. Or whether you wish to believe that all of these are entities that exist outside of you, somewhere else, that's okay, works the same, right? But it's all real on whatever level you wish to take it as. But they still need our permission, right? It's believed that they can't do anything unless it's a life or death situation, right? Unless we give specific permission. And that's why I tell every single person who comes to see me, whether it be student or client or anything else, or probably, some people who aren't interested in hearing from me at all, that you've got to have an altar, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because that is, but through the process of creating and maintaining your altar, you are giving continual permission to the other side to show up and work magic in your life. And if you do that, then you're off to the races, right? And then you too will have extraordinary things happen. Things you can't explain, right? And that quiet, everyday magic of connection that you were talking about, that is the most important stuff.
So I want to really dig in a little bit to ethnomusicology and how, one thing I have always been fascinated with in paranormal investigation experiences I've had is I like to research the time period in which maybe the home or the building was built, or like the time period in which different events happened, and imagine what style of music they would have listened to, or maybe what music was popular at that time. And I spent some time at an abandoned old country farmhouse that, was built, I think, in 1910. I remember finding all kinds of music that would have been played if they had some kind of phonograph or, something like that, what kind of music might have been played, and playing that loud on a speaker in the house and just sitting there playing that music. And I'm like, I hope that this brings some energy up. Or, skipping ahead 20 years. Okay, when the family's now a little older and, what kind of music would they have listened to then? I am wondering how your ethnomusicology works with, the quote paranormal.
Sure. And we do that too, right?
Yeah.
So, we're a stereotype, right? We live in a haunted house in New Orleans.
Yeah.
It's silly, right?
Uh-huh.
But we do, we listen to very, very early, Hot 7, Hot 8, which is the, kind of early jazz music from New Orleans. All these beautiful old records from the time that this house would have been built. And, it really does put everything in a kind of energetic perspective. But it seems like everything I do lives in different places, but it really doesn't, because at the core of everything I do is this deep, unabiding interest in how people move through their own cultural framework and understanding, whether that be through music or spirituality or whatever else, right? So ethnomusicology, you had a beautiful musicologist on a couple of episodes ago, Olivia, who was talking about music of seance, right? In the Victorian era. And that's so fascinating. So musicology tends to be the study of written Western music. Now, the term musicology has really opened up in recent years, but traditionally that's what musicology was. Ethnomusicology traditionally was the study of everything else, usually speaking musics that are not written down. So orally transmitted music, so folkloric music, traditional musics, right? The world over. That's where the ethno part comes from. But all of it from ethnomusicology lives under the rubric of cultural anthropology and folklore. And so it depends on what school you go to. Sometimes they have an ethnomusicology program that lives in a music department. Other times they have one that lives in an anthropology department. For my master's degree, I went to Indiana University, and theirs is ethnomusicology and folklore together, which I think is the most intuitive combination because you're basically doing the same stuff.
Yeah.
And so it's basically the study of how people use music to understand their space in the world, how to navigate it, how to move through time and space using music. And so I do the same thing now. I'm just broadening it to a more folkloric perspective. And when it comes to sound in haunted spaces. That opens up all these new fascinating horizons. I'm super interested in the work of Sonia Rinaldi, who is a Brazilian
Absolutely.
medium who does a lot of work in light particles mostly, but she also works in sound particles as well. And I mean, she obviously could explain it 1,000 times better than me. There's a documentary on YouTube, I think, about her if you're interested. But basically, the idea is entities on the other side, ghosties, whatever we want to talk about, use light or sound particles, and they can rearrange them in different ways to create like EVPs or, phenomenon, or show their faces on some piece of fabric like she does, right? So it's super fascinating. So there are all these new sorts of worlds opening up in terms of the study of sound and paranormal or energetically complex places that I think is super fascinating. And it's a whole new ballgame.
I love, we could talk for 2 more hours about that. You incorporated music in our seance.
Yeah.
And so how does music play a part in a seance for you?
So I think about like a vinyl record, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there are grooves in a vinyl record. And I use that analogy for nearly everything I do. So when it comes to like, you know how it is when you're kind of in a space in your life, it could be just an hour, it could be just a day, it could be a week, where everything seems to flow really well, everything's working, and you go to the grocery store and you just, without effort, you pull into the parking space that, you would like, and then you think of somebody and they call and all this stuff.
You're on track.
You're on track, right? I think of that as a flow state, and I think of that as like a groove in a vinyl record. And the more you practice being in that space, the longer you can stay there. And we're human. We're always the record's going to scratch and we're going to get thrown off, but then we can hop back on. We can stay for longer and longer periods of time. I use the same tracks of music over and over because it's like you're wearing a groove in energetic reality. And that energetic reality that groove is worn into then becomes very weighted or energetically full of spiritual energy. It's like charging an object, right? And so so for example, I use the exact same song in every seance I do. And now that song is charged, let me tell you, right? And even if I played it in a situation that wasn't particularly a seance, probably some weird, interesting stuff would happen around us because that's just a very charged piece of music now. And so for me as a musician, I've played piano since the time I can remember. As a musician, I understand how you can use music as a conduit to hold energy. And you can work with that in such a fascinating way. And to me, some other people would push back on that probably because they think their art form is closest to God in whatever way. And again, we're not talking about organized religion. We're talking about spirituality. I don't care if you think of God as a tree or a frog or, anything at all. But to me, music is the closest to God there is. And it holds energy so extraordinarily well. And if you know what you're doing, you can use music to energetically transform a space.
Myself as a musician, if I'm in a situation where I am multitasking or wanting to, if I put myself in the position of a medium or whatever, I often have to go to unfamiliar music because as soon as I put on like that track you were talking about, that, the groove in the record, the same song over and over again, when I hear music I'm familiar with, I immediately start feeling the music and, and the little background sounds. And I have a hard time ignoring it because I want to join in, right? I want to feel the beat. And so if I'm trying to lead something or or be focused on something that isn't the music itself, I have to do some of the music that doesn't have a steady beat, or music I'm not familiar with.
Or else you'll just start partying.
I just check out and, my neck starts moving. And so I struggle with the same music over and over. Well, you said when I asked you, you and I were chatting in the days before this conversation, I asked you if there was anything else you thought you wanted to talk about. And something you said completely sparked my interest, and you were talking about the cultural research of candlelight.
Mm-hmm.
And I, on purpose, did not go deeper in our text message or in our conversation prior to this, because I am excited to learn about what that is.
Mm-hmm.
And so talk to us a little bit about the cultural research of candlelight.
So I'm sure that us academics could make it much more complicated than it needs to be, but it's a very simple kind of phenomena that it's at the very center of the reason why we named our production company Candlelight Folklore Society. There is something about lighting a candle.
Mm-hmm.
And this goes from the very beginning of time all the way to a simple candle that's on your altar at this moment. You begin to shift frequencies. You light a candle with intention, and all of a sudden there is a shift in the energetic frequency of a room that is fascinating. And we go back to that analogy of a groove in a record, same thing, right? And the more that you are able to ritualistically light a candle, and all I mean by that is, doing it with intention, right? Not just randomly, you're talking to somebody else and you light a candle, but you sit, you ground yourself, you really get into kind of a quiet space, and then you light your candle. It shifts the energetic frequency of a room nearly immediately. And certainly when you leave that candle burning for quite some time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And as you do that, you're changing the energetic makeup of the room. You are raising the energetic frequency, the vibration of the room. And as you do that, the universe is way up here, all the way in the sky, and we're down here, right? We are heavy. We're dense. We're in earth
Mm-hmm.
school. That's what they call it, right? Because we are just so earthbound. And so we have to do all this work to get our vibration up high to kind of have these moments of co-creation with them. And the ritualistic lighting of a candle is something that is the cheapest, easiest, quickest way to transform the energy in a room, to begin to change that frequency signature to get up higher and higher and higher. And so using the candle as a space of what you're doing, in essence, is creating a liminal space, right? People talk about liminality all the time. If you don't know what that is, it is the space between point A to point B. In a house, a liminal space is a stairwell or a hallway. It's a transition in somebody's life. It's the teenage years,
Mm-hmm.
or it's those scary years post-divorce or post-health scare or whatever. These are liminal spaces, right? And the liminal spaces are where all this fascinating stuff occurs. And so basically what you're doing by creating or intentionally, ritualistically lighting a candle is you're creating a liminal space. And everything that lives in the spiritual world lives in those liminal spaces. And so if you can then do this, you are creating like a fast track to being able to touch them.
I love it. Sometimes it makes me sad, and I find it with myself too. I'm lighting less and less physical candles and using more of the very realistic LED candles. And I use them sometimes in group investigations. We pass out those candles, which is sometimes an awesome source of low light. But I also tend to be the person that I love candles so much, I might accidentally forget about a candle sometimes in a room. I'm not going to lie. And I think my husband's like, yeah, we're done with candles for a while.
You're on candle timeout.
Yes. And I'm not in a period now where when my husband and I first got together, I had a kind of a candle obsession. And for a long time, and I still do, in the basement, we have what we call the candle emporium, where you just go down for, if you need a candle, there you go. But what about the shift from real candles for many people? And sometimes there's not an option, right? You go into an old theater or an old historic place and you're not going to be able to light a candle. Does the intention work the same?
Intention is magic, and the intention can turn something that is one thing into something else, right? And especially if you are working on your spiritual practice and you're working on the awareness of your own energy and working on raising your vibration and all these things that we work on, if you set an intention that you're going to turn something into something else, it will turn. We're people. We live in the real world, right? And that's why I get so irritated with these kind of, ceremonial magic wackadoodles who are like, oh, you have to like 30-step spells of the stuff and you have to have exactly the right whatever twig or I don't know what, right?
Bird feather.
Yeah, you have to have whatever. It's stupid. Like, what did witches do? Witches did what healers. Let's not even use the word witch. Healers, and mostly women, right?
Mm-hmm.
What did they do? They couldn't go to the store and get some specific type of twine. They did what they did, right? And so it's not the materials that matter, it's the intention that matters. Now, of course, I'm old school. And of course, we understand that if you can use a candle, a real candle, that's best. But if you can only work with the fake candles, your intention is what's going to turn that into magic.
Spectacular. So one of the questions that I don't think I've asked in a while, I mean, it's been a while since we've had an episode in general, but I love, especially in this space, when you're talking to a lot of people who are, very spiritual or physical possessions. I don't need physical possessions because, of course, you can't take any physical possessions with you.
Can't take it with you.
So that's why one of my favorite questions to ask, especially mediums, is what is your most treasured possession?
Dang. Nobody's ever asked me that question.
Oh, well, here we go. And it doesn't have to be related to any of our topics we've talked about.
Well, leaving out people and animals, right? Who are, of course, most important. I would probably have to say my piano.
Nice.
I have a 1969 Kawai black original baby grand piano.
Stop it.
Yeah. And I love that thing. And it is so highly charged with energy. I mean, which I don't like, but the cats sleep on it. And it's, this whole thing. So then I clean it every day. And Randy's irritated because he had a bearskin rug he wanted to put in the living room. And, that's where my piano lives. And so the bearskin rug's got to go somewhere else. But I love that thing so much. But you know what? It's huge. And I have all of these traumatic stories about moving it from one house to another house over time.
Amen, sister.
Deep trauma. Okay.
Yes.
Deep trauma moving that stupid piano. So, if the question then is what is a reasonable thing to take with me that, doesn't cost thousands of dollars to move and, you could take with you if you had to pack one bag. My dad, who died in 2014, had this belt buckle that is like a bull rider, right? It's a picture of a bull rider and it's getting bucked into the air. And it's just this really cool belt buckle. And for my whole childhood, I remember looking at that thing and loving it. And, everybody was cowboys when I was growing up, right? And so, going to rodeos all the time. I grew up riding horses. And it's on my altar now. And it has just this, it's so highly charged with not only energy, but, my whole childhood is kind of, that is a symbol for so many things in my life. So I guess, in addition to the dogs and the cats and the husband and the stuff, if I had to take one thing, then it would be that.
I love it. That's beautiful. And not in a million years would I have expected a belt buckle to, have been.
What do you think it was going to be? My broom?
No. I love it. I love it. I love it. Tell us, first of all, where people can find you. And you do have some socials and you've mentioned about the documentary, but you could talk about that again. You also mentioned maybe a few books. I don't know if they're related to anything that we've talked about, but just let us know what's going on with Dr. Holly Hobbs and the production company and this new journey you're on.
Sure. Well, as things in our society continue to break down, right? Randy and I are really leaning into just the projects that are fun and the things that we like to do because that really matters the most, right? So Candlelight Folklore Society is our brand new production company, like I was saying. And so you can follow our work at candlelightfolkloresociety.com. As a medium, I run morninggloryhealing.com. And you can get on there if you want to do a reading with me. I'm not so sure how long I'm going to continue to do private readings, but we'll see. But at the very least, I'm on Patreon. If you're scared and don't want to do an individual reading, or if you just kind of want to hang out at the edges of community, then my Patreon I just started it last September, and I'm loving Patreon.
Yeah.
And I put up a bunch of different stuff there. So that's patreon.com/healingmorningglory. It's backwards. And then in terms of the Brumley House documentary that we just put out, that lives on YouTube. And there are two versions, youtube.com/@Candlelight Folklore Society. And when you get there, then you can find the short version of the Brumley House, which is about 14 minutes. That's the mini documentary. And those are the series of mini documentaries we're going to be doing. But there's also a behind the scenes. And that's a long version. It's like about an hour. So if you're interested in the Brumley House, you can actually go into the house, move around the house.
Get a tour from Steve and Judy.
Yes, all of that. And so if you're interested enough to see the 14-minute version and you want to see more, then also on that YouTube channel, you can go to this longer version and see the behind the scenes. And then on socials, there's Instagram. Everything is Healing Morning Glory, Candlelight Society. And you can find me in one of those places.
Awesome. And listeners, I'll put links to all of those things in the show notes or, on the website, bigseance.com for this episode, which will be 263. Any other nerdy, juicy information you feel like you want to share with us, or any final thoughts?
Well, I think it's hilarious that this is episode 263 because it's an 11.
Okay, tell us about that.
I'm a numerology 11, and Randy is incredibly irritated with me at all times because everywhere he goes with me, something adds up to 11. And he just is so sick of it. So we talked about me being a numerologist. If there was any one thing that was going to be the witchiest thing I know how to do or that I've learned over time, it is numerology. That stuff goes so deep. Numerology is the biggest framework for understanding how energy moves in our universe. I mean, so much so that I can do a whole numerology chart, lifetime chart, and go year by year to see what's going to happen in your life. And I never believed this before I started doing numerology charts, but everybody is kind of, shot onto some sort of storyline based on the numerological value of the days of their birth and their name as it appears on their birth chart in Pythagorean numerology.
So is it like predictive?
It tells you when you're going to die.
Wow, shut up.
Yes. You can do all of this stuff in a numerology chart and see, when it's most likely you're going to get married, if and when you're going to necessarily have a child, what you're going to look for in each. And they're so incredibly predictive. And so, yes, I'm an 11. Most people in the world, like 90% of the world, if you add up their dates of the birthday one by one, it comes to a 2-digit number. And then you reduce to that 2-digit number and it becomes a number 1 to 9. That's most people. And there's about 10% of the world where those numbers add up to 11, 22, 33, or 44. And those are considered master angel numbers. And I'm an 11 and I see 11s literally everywhere. So I had to laugh when you said that this was going to be episode, whatever it was, 263.
So when I said 263, your brain immediately goes 1, 2, 3.
Bing, 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 bing. Yep. Mm-hmm. That's it.
So it goes back to your birth date. That's how this works.
Yes. So you add all the dates of your birthday one by one, and it comes to a 2-digit number. Now, if those numbers add up to 11, 22, 34, 33, or 44, you can't reduce to a lower, but everybody else you do. Mm-hmm. And then based on that number, I can tell you all sorts of stuff about what's going to happen in your life.
Well, and when you said it tells you when you're going to die, I got the biggest goosebumps. And I'm thinking, I wonder how many people are comfortable with opening that door.
So I always ask, right?
Yeah.
Most of what I do these days is teaching mediumship. Mm-hmm. So most of the stuff I'm doing is just with students, and I'm teaching them as much as I can. And part of that is teaching them basic numerology. And so I'll always do a numerology chart for them. So I do lots. I don't get many numerological chart bookings for just people off the street, right? Either they don't know what it is, or they don't understand it, or they're scared of it. That could be part of it. But I always ask, and I always say, okay, what's your comfort level? What do you want to know? And are you comfortable? If I see a death, do you want me to share it? And, I think I've only had one person that it was like, hell no. Everybody else was like, yes, tell me everything I'd like to know.
Wow, that surprises me.
Yeah.
Wow.
Now, I will say, if I saw, now everybody's going to be like, she's lying, don't do it. But I was going to say, if I saw a very early death, I would not share that. Because, and honestly, it hasn't happened. I think it's only been once that I saw somebody who was going to die when they were 60. And I didn't share that because they were young at the time. And, but if I saw a young death, I would not share that, because the whole point is, if somebody is in a space where they come to you, I am never going to tell you something that makes you live in fear for the rest of time. That's not what this is about, right? Everything is about healing. But yes, if it says you're going to die at 82, I'm going to tell you.
Wow. Well, Dr. Holly Hobbs, I cannot wait to hopefully join you in a beautiful haunted location again sometime soon in the future.
Yes, please.
And I thank you for joining me in the parlor today. You rock.
Thank you. You're the best, Patrick. We love you.
For show notes, including links to anything we may have mentioned in this episode, visit bigseance.com. And you can continue the discussion and hang out with a great community of paranerds by joining us in the Big Seance Parlor on Facebook. Want to hear your voice in a future episode? Go to bigseance.com/feedback to learn how. Thank you so much for listening. Unfortunately, it's time to blow the candles out, but we'll see you and light them again next time.